Have you ever felt like your sensitivity is a curse rather than a gift? That every emotion, yours or someone else's, hits you like a tidal wave, leaving you drained before the day even begins? For most sensitive people, life feels intense, too intense. Even the smallest interactions can feel like storms, unpredictable and impossible to control. But what if this intensity isn't a flaw? What if, instead of being a burden, your heightened perception is the very gateway to understanding the world and yourself at a deeper level? Carl Jung believed that psychological maturity isn't about suppressing feelings or bending the world to your will. It's about learning to hold yourself fully, even when emotions threaten to overwhelm. Most of us were told the opposite. You're too emotional, you're too reactive, you're too fragile. These words echo through our childhoods, shaping how we see ourselves. Sensitivity was framed as weakness, a problem to fix. And so many people spend their lives trying to suppress it, numb it, or hide it entirely. Yet Jung noticed that highly sensitive individuals have thin psychological boundaries, not because they are fragile, but because they are open, receptive, and capable of profound insight. They notice subtle cues others miss, a slight change in tone, an unspoken emotion, the tension lingering between words, the shadow behind a smile. The challenge isn't that they feel too much. The challenge is no one taught them how to contain and integrate what they feel, to harness it instead of being overwhelmed by it. In this video, we'll explore the path from emotional overwhelm to inner authority, from chaos to clarity, from sensitivity to powerful presence. Imagine feeling emotions fully without being consumed. Imagine being aware of every subtle shift around you, but remaining grounded, clear, and centered. Sensitivity is not a curse. It is a superpower waiting to be understood, a lens through which you can see more deeply than most people ever will. But to wield this power, you must first confront the fear of it, the shame imposed by a world that values toughness over depth. Over the next scenes, you'll learn how to transform sensitivity from a source of overwhelm into a foundation for psychological maturity, clarity, and influence. By the end, you'll see the true power isn't about controlling the world, it's about mastering yourself, and through that, you naturally influence everything around you. Beneath every sensitive exterior lies a hidden truth, the shadow of unlived life. The parts of yourself you were taught to ignore, suppress, or deny. Childhood often teaches us that our instincts, our emotions, our curiosity, these are dangerous, that expressing them will lead to rejection, judgment, or harm. So we learn to lock parts of ourselves away. We hide our anger, silence our desires, and dim our joy, thinking it's safer to remain unseen. Jung called this the shadow, the sum of everything we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. Each suppressed thought, emotion, or longing accumulates like invisible weight. Over time, this shadow grows, influencing our reactions, choices, and relationships, often without our awareness. You might feel exhausted, anxious, or disconnected, yet not know why. The irony is that the very qualities society labels as too much, sensitivity, empathy, depth, are what allow you to perceive this shadow and eventually integrate it. But integration is painful. Facing the shadow means confronting parts of yourself that you feared or rejected, those impulses and desires that feel dangerous, inappropriate, or overwhelming. Many avoid this confrontation, seeking comfort in distraction, approval, or control, anything to avoid the raw truth of what lies inside. Yet those who dare to explore their shadow discover an unexpected gift, a reservoir of authenticity, creativity, and power that has been waiting beneath the surface all along. Jung emphasized that ignoring this process doesn't make the shadow disappear. It only grows, subtly steering our lives, creating patterns of avoidance, anxiety, and unfulfilled potential. The shadow manifests in relationships. You might feel drained by others' emotions, triggered by minor conflicts, or endlessly frustrated by recurring patterns. Avoiding the shadow creates a cycle. The more you suppress, the more you feel powerless, and the more external forces seem to dominate your life. But acknowledging it changes everything. Seeing the shadow for what it is, not as an enemy, but as unrealized potential, is the first step towards psychological maturity. Integration doesn't erase difficulties, it transforms them. The intensity of your emotions becomes a guide, not a burden. Your sensitivity becomes a compass rather than a chain. In the next scene, we'll explore the pain of integration, how facing the shadow challenges us, and why it is essential for unlocking our inner authority and mature presence. Integration is rarely gentle. It is a confrontation with the parts of yourself that you have long avoided, denied, or feared, and the process can feel like an emotional storm raging inside. Every suppressed impulse, every emotion left unexplored rises to the surface, demanding acknowledgement, recognition, and ultimately acceptance. For many, this confrontation triggers fear, shame, and resistance, as if the psyche itself protests against being awakened to truths long buried. You may feel overwhelmed, confused, or even paralyzed, unsure which part of yourself to trust, which desires to follow, or which instincts to honor. The pain is not accidental. It is the psyche's way of shaking you awake, of forcing a reckoning with the entirety of your being, including the fragments you have ignored. Jung described this as the night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious, where the ego meets its own limitations and confronts the raw material of the self. It is uncomfortable, disorienting, and at times terrifying, because it forces you to witness the contradictions, the suppressed desires, and the aspects of yourself you may have judged harshly. And yet, avoidance only prolongs suffering. The more you resist, the more fragmented and powerless you feel, as if the hidden aspects of your psyche are silently directing your life from behind the scenes. True integration demands courage, patience, and a willingness to experience discomfort without fleeing, because only by facing what is avoided can one begin to reclaim wholeness. Each moment of confrontation, each acknowledgement of a hidden feeling, strengthens your capacity to contain complexity and expands the space in which authentic choice becomes possible. The pain is thus, paradoxically, a pathway to freedom. The more fully you confront and integrate, the less reactive, fearful, or fragmented you become. Integration reshapes perception. Emotions are no longer enemies to suppress, but signals guiding toward growth, insight, and deeper self-understanding. Resistance, though tempting, only perpetuates inner conflict. The shadow grows in silence, subtly steering choices and relationships, often without conscious recognition. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to meet the unexamined, chaotic, and uncomfortable aspects of yourself and gradually transform them into conscious energy. In the following scene, we'll explore inner authority versus external validation, showing how reclaiming your shadow empowers authentic presence in a world obsessed with approval. Most people live their lives chasing approval, constantly measuring their worth against the expectations, judgments, and validations of others. Each compliment, each criticism, each subtle shift in the tone of a conversation can sway their mood, decision, and sense of self, creating a fragile internal world. Jung emphasized that the road to maturity is not paved with applause or recognition, but with the quiet development of an internal compass that remains steady regardless of outside influence. Inner authority emerges when you begin to observe yourself without judgment, when you witness your emotions, thoughts, and impulses with curiosity instead of fear. This authority does not demand power over others. It does not insist on being right or accepted. Instead, it radiates confidence through presence, coherence, and clarity. When you are rooted in yourself, the opinions of others lose their grip. Criticism becomes information, praise becomes acknowledgement, and your emotional balance remains intact. But developing inner authority is challenging. It requires confronting habits of seeking validation, fear of rejection, and patterns formed since childhood. Every step towards self-reliance illuminates the parts of you that have been shadowed by the need to please, to conform, or to be accepted. True maturity is realized when your decisions stem from internal alignment rather than the shifting winds of external expectation. Inner authority allows sensitivity to become strength rather than vulnerability. Emotional awareness becomes a guide, not a chain, enabling you to act with confidence and discernment. External validation, though seductive, is fleeting. It creates cycles of dependence, doubt, and exhaustion that keep you small and reactive. By shifting focus inward, you reclaim energy previously spent seeking permission and approval, replacing it with presence, influence, and psychological coherence. Authority without force is not passive. It is steady, quiet, and deeply magnetic because it comes from integration of self rather than domination of others. Jung taught that this presence, cultivated through self-awareness and shadow integration, is what differentiates psychologically mature individuals from those who remain stuck in dependence and reactivity. In the next scene, we'll explore silence, influence, and the mature presence, showing how the calm authority of an integrated person transforms their interactions and environment. True influence is rarely loud or forceful. In fact, the most powerful presence often arises from silence, stillness, and self-possession, not from words or actions alone. When someone has integrated their shadow, faced their fears, and cultivated inner authority, their presence carries weight, not because they demand it, but because they emanate coherence. Silence, in this context, is not emptiness. It is a concentrated space of awareness, a container for perception, emotion, and intentional action. Those attuned to their inner world notice that words and gestures carry more weight when they come from someone grounded, integrated, and self-aware. Influence emerges naturally, like a subtle current in water, moving others without overt effort, because it is rooted in alignment rather than force. In contrast, those dependent on external validation attempt to control, to impress, or to dominate, creating tension and resistance rather than connection. Mature presence does not react to external circumstances with panic or impulsivity. It observes, assesses, and responds with intention, creating ripples of calm authority. This presence is magnetic, not because it demands attention, but because it communicates trust, clarity, and the promise of stability. Internal coherence allows the sensitive individual to influence without conflict, to guide without controlling, and to be heard without speaking excessively. The mastery of silence is learned gradually through consistent self-reflection, shadow integration, and the discipline of observing without reacting. Those who cultivate this presence notice a shift. Conflicts become easier to navigate, conversations become deeper, and even ordinary interactions carry subtle influence. The paradox is that the less you try to control, the more effective your presence becomes. Effortless influence arises from grounded awareness, not external pressure. By cultivating this mature presence, sensitivity is transformed from vulnerability into a powerful channel for insight, empathy, and authentic connection. This is the stage where true psychological maturity begins to manifest. When your inner world is coherent, your emotions integrated, and your authority silent but palpable. In the next scene, we will see the integrated ending, how authority without force, presence without striving, and mastery of self culminate in authentic influence. Integration culminates not in loud displays or overt control, but in a subtle, unwavering authority that flows naturally from a fully aligned self. The mature individual does not react impulsively. Instead, they move through the world with calm discernment, letting presence guide action rather than fear or external pressure. Authority without force is magnetic precisely because it is grounded, coherent, and internally sourced, creating influence through resonance rather than compulsion. Sensitivity, once perceived as vulnerability, becomes a bridge to empathy and insight, allowing the individual to read, understand, and respond to the emotional landscape of others. Conflict is no longer a threat, but an opportunity to exercise discernment and presence, to guide rather than dominate, to influence without coercion. The shadow, the suppressed impulses, the fears, all are integrated, transformed into conscious energy that fuels wisdom, creativity, and quiet confidence. Each choice made from this grounded presence carries weight, not because of volume or pressure, but because of authenticity, clarity, and unshakable alignment with self. Jung emphasized that this level of psychological maturity is rare, not because people lack strength, but because it demands courage to face oneself fully and embrace complexity. True power emerges quietly, in the calm gaze, the measured words, the presence that naturally commands attention without demanding it. The integrated person understands that control is an illusion. Influence is cultivated through alignment, sensitivity, and deliberate stillness. Others may chase approval, recognition, or dominance, but the mature individual moves with self-contained authority, unshaken by external judgment or chaos. Presence, grounded in integration, transforms the world around them. Interactions become more meaningful, influence flows naturally, and even silence carries weight. This is the ultimate paradox: power without aggression, influence without force, authority without striving, achieved through courage, integration, and deep self-awareness. Jung believed that reaching this state is rare, yet accessible to those willing to confront fear, embrace the shadow, and cultivate presence over performance. As we conclude, remember, mastery of self is not achieved through control or force, but through alignment, awareness, and the quiet, magnetic authority of an integrated life.